What's up, everybody? This is Erin from Aaron'sAudioCorner.com, and I am wearing the same shirt as I was in the Purify video because this is the same day. I am doing a back-to-back review of the Purify, followed up now by the Dynaudio MW182. So let's do it. So full disclosure here, it's been about a week or two since I've actually looked at the data from this speaker, and I probably should have gone back over the data again to review it, but I'm going to kind of wing this one, and hopefully I don't stumble all the way through it and I'm somewhat coherent and makes sense as I'm going through. So we've got the MW182 from Dynaudio. It is a 10-inch woofer. I've heard some people call it a 9-inch woofer, but Dyn actually calls it a 10-inch woofer, so that's what I'm going to call it. And hologram, it's got it on there. Has a large voice coil, typical Dynaudio thing, at least from back in the day. Now, from what I understand, their more recent drivers, at least for the home audio market, are using smaller diameter coils with longer excursion. And I don't know if that's true or not, but that's just kind of what I've seen people talk about. Somebody on DIY Audio also told that to me and provided me with a picture of one of their new speakers, I think out of the Contour speaker itself. So anyway, yeah, so this is a nominal 4-ohm load. It is pretty beefy, and it's actually pretty shallow for a 10. Most people use this as a dedicated mid bass. You might be able to use it as a subwoofer. I haven't really even looked into that possibility because everybody in car audio that I know uses this. Well, I should say everybody I know in car audio who uses this speaker, they use it as a dedicated mid bass, either in their kick panels or in their doors. And usually I think if it's in the kick panels, it's going to be vented externally to try to provide it with as much airspace as possible. And with that said, let's go ahead and jump into this data. Here is my website, and here is a fancy pants picture. And I'm going to scroll down, here's some information. Retail price is about $800 per pair. And I was told that by a Dynaudio dealer. So that value should be correct as of at least today. Test results, let's see, about 4-ohm load. Inductance is reasonable for a woofer of this size and what it's supposed to be doing. FS is 40 hertz, that's okay. The weight of the cone seems reasonable to me. The motor force, I don't know, my hunch is that that's probably a little bit lower than ideal, but that may be adequate to drive the mass of the cone, but we'll see. The QTS is 0.691, so about 0.7, which basically means that for the car audio folks, you're always looking for that 0.7, you know, if you're going to put it in your doors. So you basically got your quote-unquote perfect QTS value for this. Now, whether or not I agree that it's perfect, because you're still going to wind up using a high-pass filter, electronic one at least, and that kind of, it doesn't completely make moot the QTS and the FS, but when you are using a high-pass filter, the QTS value, it's taken more with a grain of salt. And there goes my neighbor mowing his yard before it starts raining, so you'll have to ignore the mowing because I'm not going to try to do this again later. The sensitivity is around 86 dB for the TS parameters, but we'll see what that looks like when we get into the frequency response. The linear distortion at 10% is 3.9 millimeters one way. I did not measure this as a subwoofer, or I should say, I didn't also provide the data for it as a subwoofer because I don't know anybody who would use this as a dedicated subwoofer. Typically they're using it as a mid bass between 40 to 300 hertz or so, give or take. So that's why I'm providing the 10% linear, or the 10% distortion value for linear X-Max rather than 10% and 20% like I've done for some of the more recent 8-inch woofer subwoofers that I've completed testing on. Keep going. The BL curve looks quite good. It's pretty broad. It's not flat through the breadth though. It's really not quite linear, and once you get above plus or minus 1 millimeter. So I don't know. The motor force is falling off. Okay. Here's a funny one. Stiffness of suspension. So this is basically saying as the coil is coming inward, it's getting a little bit more sloppy, and as it's going out, it's tightening up. Now, when I'm looking at the data for the linear excursion, it seemed like I hit the parameters roughly at the same time for my maximum set parameters, and I kind of think that maybe that's indicative of Dyn actually engineering the speaker to hit the limits at around the same point in time, as far as linear throw goes. So that's interesting. Electrical inductance, the variance is about 0.2 millihenries, and it doesn't look like they're using a shorting ring here, which is going to be a problem when you play the speaker near FS. So if you're going to use it as a mid bass, I would make sure that you stay away from FS. The lower you play to FS, the more intermodulated distortion you're going to get on the mid-range frequency, and the distortion you're going to get from the mid-range, also from the BL curve not being quite flat, and but it is symmetrical at least, so they've got that going for them. I'm going to keep going, keep going. This is all stuff that you can go back and read if you want to. Just for those who are interested in this, I've said it before, but if you're going to model an enclosure, I'll also provide a table with large plus cold. That's typically what would be the best way to model an enclosure based on for the TS parameters that I'm providing here, because these are taken in real time as a speaker is being driven. And as most of you probably know, TS parameters can change, and obviously they do change based on some of the data I was just showing you over excursion and over time as the coil starts to heat up things. So with that in mind, large plus cold if you want to measure or if you want to model the enclosure. But again, I don't think anybody's going to use this particular speaker in an enclosure with the QTS at 0.7. If you put an enclosure, it's going to raise that QT up and it's going to be resonant, and you don't want that. Keep going. Frequency response on axis linearity. So I have provided the mean SPL from 40 hertz to 300 hertz, and that is at about 88 dB. So actually really good sensitivity. It's plus or minus 1.5 dB between about, I'm looking at this and I'm seeing about 40 hertz to about 700 hertz. So that's well within the passband of most people. Indicates to me that this would be a great choice for a mid-bass in terms of linearity alone. We're going to keep going. Off-axis frequency response looks pretty good. Dyn always has a good off-axis response. In the SOTAR and the MW182 I tested, I even think the E650 that I tested years and years back, I think that had good off-axis response too, but I can't quite remember on that one. And harmonic distortion. So let's see what this profile looks like. This line down here is 1%, so it's increased above 1% at 100 hertz. Yeah, at about, I think that was 92 dB, and then when it's at 100 dB, it's above 1% distortion below 200 hertz, and actually, basically, it's above 100% distortion at 100 dB all the way throughout. So it's not the greatest in terms of harmonic distortion. It's certainly not as good as the Purify. Certainly not as good as this guy, but with the increased surface area, that helps alleviate some concerns in that regard. And as far as 3% THD goes, you're above that at 100 dB at around 60 hertz. So if I'm just going to use 3% THD as my go-to point, I'm going to say that if you're crossing this over with a steep filter, you can probably cross it down to 50. I don't know that I'd go any lower than that, just because you're going to start introducing distortion artifacts when you do that. And then we're going to go to the intermod distortion, and that's kind of an opinion, so don't shoot me if you're going to say I run it down to 40 and it's fun. That's, again, it's just kind of an opinion based on the data that I'm seeing. Intermod distortion with the bass tone fixed at 40 hertz, which is FS, which is a good reason not to run it down that low, because you don't want to cross it at FS. The intermod distortion in terms of amplitude is above what, 20, negative 20? Actually, it's below negative 20 when you're about 300 hertz. So that's pretty decent for the output. I think the sensitivity there, again, is a help there. And if you cross it at 80, so basically if I just say I'm only playing 80 to what is this, 6,000 or 80 hertz is my fixed bass tone. And then at 200 to 6,000, let's look at primarily below 300, because that's probably where we're going to cross it as a mid bass. The distortion is very, very low on that end. So I'm thinking 60 to 300 hertz would probably be like perfect for this speaker. Keep the overall distortion very, very low. And then we'll go to max SPL testing. And in this case, this red indicates that it has exceeded the compression test. And looking at that, that's not fair necessarily for this speaker, because I think most everybody's going to run it to 300 hertz. But I conduct all my 8-inch, 6-inch, 7-inch woofers max SPL testing in the same manner. So you're comparing apples to apples. I'm going to keep going down, and then this is another test which is more wide open. But let's go and look at the actual numbers. So the max SPL I got for this speaker is about 102 dB, which is pretty good. The compression was a limiting factor there, but if you were crossing it over below 500 hertz where the compression creeped up, then you're definitely going to get more output from this speaker in that particular range. And then for the second tier test, where I'm playing from 40 hertz to 3200 hertz, the max SPL is 97 dB, and that was limited here in compression by almost 3 kilohertz. I don't think anybody is going to play this speaker that high, so again, it's more just a pointer. But these values are pretty good, and we certainly could get it to play higher than that within a typical bandpass. And then the bottom line. So my measured linear excursion is about 4.7 millimeters one way, based on 10% distortion, no shorting ring. FS is around 40 hertz. I put 39 hertz here. So cross it like a typical mid bass. The linear response of this guy, so its frequency response on axis, is really quite linear through a broad range, more than most people are going to play it as a dedicated mid bass again. And I think 50 to 300 hertz, 60 to 300 hertz is prime range for this kind of speaker. I wish the linear excursion was higher, but it's not. And from what I understand, this actual speaker may be going away from the Dyn lineup, and I don't know if it's going to be replaced or not. That's just what I've been told, and I'm not going to cite any sources, but that's what I've been told from somebody who should definitely know. And with that, that actually is going to do this review. It was quick and short, to the point. Bottom line, in my opinion, is it's a very expensive speaker. Price-wise, I don't have enough experience with speakers of this size to say. You know, if you're looking at something like the Purify, which is less than $800 per pair, then it certainly is a better choice in terms of engineering credit goes, but it's not a 10-inch woofer. This one is. So I think this will be a fine mid-bass for most people. Again, 50 to 300 hertz, 60 to 300 hertz. Use it, rock it, run it, buy them used if you can, and maybe save a good bit of money. But yeah, it's a good speaker. I think I would recommend this one. So, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. Make sure to subscribe and hit the notifications bell and tell your friends. Yeah, because I'm trying to blow this thing up. And that's it for me. I hope you guys enjoyed it again, and I'll talk to y'all later. Peace.